This is Create the Next from ProCFO Partners, where every week we explore strategies and ideas for financial management and growth to help today's businesses put their financial picture in context.
Welcome back to Create the Next. I am Chris Vintliff, and I'm joined today by Raji Kalra, who's amazing, and our guest, Jeff Gedmin, who is the president and CEO of MBN, which is Middle East Broadcasting Networks, which is I'm so excited to just learn and listen, Jeff, about this. Nonprofit international multimedia corporation that communicates news about the U.S. to Arabic-speaking audiences across the Middle East and North Africa. I think I got that right. What an interesting just entire situation. I'm really looking forward to listening in. These are my favorite discussions, everybody, when we get to kind of listen into the nuts and bolts of how ProCFO Partners works inside of an organization and how those organizations work. So, Raji, I'm going to hand it over to you, and I'm going to sit back like the rest of our audience and learn and listen, and I'll come back later and we'll continue the conversation.
Sounds good. Thanks, Chris. Welcome, everyone, and thank you, Jeff, for agreeing to join me on this little fireside chat over Zoom. I am a ProCFO CFO, and I've been with the company since the inception, and I primarily focus on social enterprise space, so nonprofits, social enterprises, mission-based organizations. I've been doing so for about 20 years. And I'm joined today by Jeff Gedmin, who is our fearless leader at Middle East Broadcasting Networks. And Jeff, if you'd love to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about MBN, that'd be great.
Chris, thank you. And Raji, thank you. And more in due course about Raji, who is amazing. So how about that right at the top? And absolute truth in that. So Chris, you said that I am the president, CEO of Middle East Broadcasting Networks. That has been adjusting budgets as we speak, but $100 million of taxpayer-funded media going to the Arab, Middle East, and North Africa. We do news, information, responsible commentary, and analysis. We are not propaganda. We are not disinformation. We are, however, American soft power. It's real, authentic, credible journalism aligned broadly with U.S. foreign policy goals with bipartisan support in Washington, D.C. So to me, I just say, Raji, very quickly, I've run institutes in London and Berlin, media in Washington, Prague, and now Springfield, Virginia, with so-called MBN. And it's a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you. So I'll kick us off by how we started, or how I got to meet you and know you. When your team planned the changes that took place, transitioning the CFO and controller, your pro-CFO, yours truly, came in the very next business day, which was quite a quick turnaround. How did you, as the CEO, experience this transition? And if anything stood out to you about how we rebuilt the reporting structure, stabilized the team, what stood out to you in those initial moments?
Sure. Now, I said MBN, Middle East Broadcasting Networks, does not do propaganda and disinformation. Now I'm going to sound like propaganda for Raji, but here goes. So I've been with this company a little longer than a year and a half. And when I came, we undertook substantial reform, restructure, downsizing. Right off the bat, we sadly, but necessarily, let go 200 people. We reduced our overall staffing by north of 20%. And then came the reelection of President Donald J. Trump. And then came things you all have heard about, like DOGE and the reduction of the federal bureaucracy and transformation, right, wrong, or in between, about of the way that Washington does business. So you joined us, Raji, in midstream. We're all on our own. We had started a process aimed at enhancing accountability, enhancing oversight, having a much more outcome-driven culture, a leaner staff. I started with around 900. We let go about 200 people. As I said, painful. Not a joy, but it was budgetarily necessary at that time. But then came this, I would call it a tsunami of change, where we're no longer masters of our own agenda. So we were reacting. We had to be agile. We had to be nimble. We oftentimes had limited visibility about what was coming next with the funder, USG, which is, by the way, the White House and Capitol Hill, 435 members of Congress, 100 senators, complicated. So that's a long way of setting up kind of the wind up and the pitches. Raji, you were a blessing. We needed someone who was super, uber competent, someone who understood the importance of being regulatory compliant 24/7, but also someone who had the right style and temperament quickly to get in alignment with the senior management team, pardon me, with staff, and with the board. We have an independent board. So I was very grateful. You were in unstable moments, you were a stabilizing factor.
Thank you. And I mean, I think the feeling's mutual. I feel like when I joined, it was, mid-December. Trump was going to be sworn in the next month, and there was a lot of uncertainty. And the team, I was new to everybody, but the team really welcomed me, both my peers, the leadership team, as well as the finance and at the time ops team, but we can talk about that and how we sort of switched that a bit. But yeah, I don't think the trust was given. And I know you said, I think it was trust is earned, but I also feel like they gave me the benefit of the doubt early on, which helped me really make some good judgment calls and some changes pretty quickly. I think one of the things we did was to move and create more checks and balances, right, within the team, because we realized that there was too much reporting up through the financial leader. So there was room for sort of risk. There was risk of fraud. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so we mitigated that risk by changing some of the reporting structures pretty early on.
So I appreciate you saying that. It's heartening. So two things to that. So checks and balances are good for everybody. Everybody wins. No one wants to overdo regulation and any kind of organizational culture that's filled with intervention and invasiveness. But it takes me to the first point you made, trust. And the higher the trust in a company, the less need actually for rules and regulation, but always 300% checks, balances, oversight, and accountability. So I think what you said is kind and heartening for me to hear about the team welcoming you and including you. And then, of course, you brought the right perspective and the right talent and the right temperament.
I'm going to skip ahead a bit because I think we navigated some tough decisions together as things unfolded, like right sizing, prioritizing, modeling. I don't know how many, more than 3 scenarios at a time. And looking back, I wonder which of those moments felt most impactful for you.
So we say this in life today and across industries, uncertainty is the new normal, but it really is. And it's easy to say, and it's bloody hard to practice. And then I say it, but in my own life and work, I don't love it to get up bright and early and find out there's another thing coming at you. So I'll just take you back, Raji, and then frame things for our listeners or viewers. We had a moment where in the spring of last year, we had very limited cash reserves. And for a variety of reasons, we faced bankruptcy. And all choices were bad. They were just all bad. And what we elected to do that indeed involved risk and a lot of pain and no one really, a lot of pain. We decided that we would go big and cut very deep, and we're going to be very poor for an unclear amount of time. We weren't going to have money to pay rent. We weren't going to have money to pay down vendors. We weren't going to have money to pay severance. We weren't going to have money to pay out unused accrued holiday time. And for a period of time, we can have lots of people very, very angry at us, at me. And it was a risk, but it was a calculated risk. We thought that it was a reasonable risk under awful circumstances whereby we would get money back in the bank account in May, June, July, August, and we did. And we would pay down obligations to landlord and to vendors, millions of dollars, and to former employees, and we get ourselves stable, solvent, with a new strategy, lean, agile, impactful, and positioned for calendar year 2026. We did it. It was a very impactful moment. I think we learned a lot about the character of the company. Nothing to rejoice. I always say to the board, no one wants a prize for letting go 500 people. We let go 200, then we let go 500 people. Awful, awful. But it was necessary to have a future so that we could actually build back and build forward. And you're leading us in finance. We're now in a moment of build back and build forward. Thank God.
Yeah, no, definitely. That was harrowing because it was uncharted territory. And for those who don't know, MBN is sole source funding. We get one grant from the federal government. That is how we get our funding.
Yeah.
And so there's no diversification of revenue streams. And so if that's gone, or there's a block or a delay, that affects our operations. And so, having to be nimble and having to create pathways forward that are more outside the box and creative so that we can survive, I think was really important. I think for me also, it forced, in a good way, it forced the teams to work in ways that they hadn't worked before and closer together. Like, I am working with the general counsel's office daily, weekly, where, I maybe wasn't, because we were just a well-oiled machine, more of a well-oiled machine before, and before all this disruption, I didn't have there wasn't that need, but I'm so appreciative of the team that really we work so closely and so well together. Even the board stepped up too, right? They started meeting with us a few times a month at some points, as opposed to quarterly or monthly. And we're really engaged, giving us sound advice. We have some legal expertise on the board as well, which was really helpful. So I do think, that for me, that was the most impactful, was really bringing that team together. And surprisingly, I'm remote most of the time, but I come in every once in a while. And the morale, given what the organization has gone through, you mentioned a little over a year, almost a year and a half ago, 20% layoffs, then another, 80, 90% layoffs, in the spring of last year, that would kill morale and culture. But I think it strengthened our culture and cohesion. And yeah, of course, there's uncertainty and it's hard to navigate. But I do feel when I walk through the office and I speak to people, there's hope. And people are still excited to come in and do their work and their job every day. And that speaks volumes to the leadership through this difficult time period. And so I want to commend you also on leading, through this crazy year that we've had.
Well, thank you for that. And hope is a great word. If uncertainty is the new norm, but real, and change is constant, and you're often dealing with limited visibility, trust, extremely important. And I, as a general proposition, I'm not fond of top-down command and control, but situations like this kill it. They destroy it. You must work collaboratively. You must work collegially, because you're always checking your blind spots, checking. Because as you said, Raji, when you're working through times that are unprecedented, you're really assessing probabilities and coming up with the best, wisest speculation you can. You said earlier in this conversation, multiple scenarios, not two. It's not plan B or C. No, you're down to G and H very quickly. So yes, trust, hope, and collegiality.
Yep. And, I know I appreciate, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about the support or, in how myself or this role has helped you feel supported, but also and grounded in the strategy and communication with the board and the leadership team. Feel free to touch upon, like, we're completely revamping the way we budget, right? Because we have to do it completely differently than we have in the past. So, I'm curious what your views on there are there.
So thank you. So I'm highlighting with pen and paper all the good words out of this conversation. Trust, great word. Hope, great word. Budget process, ownership, really good word. It speaks to accountability. We didn't really have this luxury before. In fact, in the company, we didn't have it even prior to my time for a number of reasons. So we've had everybody stepping up. You mentioned the board, really just tremendous resource. And the spirit has been, in large thanks to the board chair, Ryan Crocker, who helps create this culture. It's all hands on deck. There's no preening, there's no posturing, there's no positioning. Turf wars reduced anywhere in the company. People are working together to survive sensibly, rationally, responsibly, survive. And so I think the budget process, you and your deputy, Michael Cox, have added real muscle, and people have stepped up. My impression is people haven't been resistant, reluctant. Why are we doing this kind of change? They like the idea of greater ownership. Gives them more responsibility, gives them a voice in the process they didn't have before. I think these things together make for a much healthier, stronger company.
Agreed, totally. So this is new high stakes federally funded environment, right? I would never call it high stakes in the past, but I would say now it is. What in this environment, what does partnership and trust with the CFO look like to you?
So I think close across the company with the CFO. Here's my next popular word of this podcast: trust, hope, ownership, and how about this? How about over communication? Never assume, always over communicate. It doesn't mean that Raji calls me 11 times a day or I track her down at 9:30 at night or Saturday morning, but leaving nothing
occasionally, right? No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, I know. Well, 10, 11 p.m., those urgent matters. But honestly, I think we work closely because both sides know to communicate and over-communicate in real time. If there's a problem or perception, the problem is evolving, we're on the same team. So you flag it and I flag it. There's no hide the ball, hope it goes away, because we know we're in this together. If mistakes happen, as they do across the whole company, back to trust, I hope I practice this. I say, on me. It's kind of like basketball, and there's a foul, and the player puts their hand up, So I think that's part of the responsibility culture we're promoting. So I think that we've developed in a relatively short amount of time, close over communication, no assumptions, shared responsibility for any problem that's arising or apt to come. And I think that's very healthy, very helpful to me, very helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to echo back the word you said. I think we hold each other both accountable, right? And in a professional and collegial way. I don't think there's any hard feelings, and I own mistakes that I've made. And, where this is a learning curve for us all, because this is, as I said before, uncharted territory, right? We've never had grants terminated for no cause in the past. And that, that puts you in a different position where you have to navigate through that and think creatively.
Mm-hmm. Let me interrupt to give an example. I'm going to be necessarily vague for reasons of discretion, and also because I can't remember exactly in granular detail what happened. But sometime some weeks ago, in the senior leadership team, an honest and innocent mistake was made. It wasn't a big deal, but it was a mistake. And so the first thing is everybody tries to own it. Second thing is I do the right thing and tell the board chair, my fault, my oversight. And the third thing is the general counsel, after 3 days of research, finds out it wasn't a mistake at all.
That's a good thing, right? But yeah.
And it wasn't the end of the world. It would have been an honest mistake and the sky was going to fall. But you have to love the team spirit where people are, I own it. Wait a second, is it really a mistake? And then our general counsel tracks it down and says, no, actually it wasn't, now that I did my homework. So that's kind of a dream way to work.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like that you have that such an open line of communication with your board chair. And I feel like I do too. And that's really, I wouldn't say rare, but best practice and great in an organization is when, the general counsel, the CEO, and the CFO have this access and communication with the board so that we can keep them informed and get their sound advice and engaged. So I think, and we've done that every step of the way, which I think has only helped our success thus far.
We do have a great board chair. Leadership shapes culture, and he helps do that. And he's very, it's rare. He's a big picture, strategic individual who cares a lot about details. And let me tell you, he once, I asked him once, he's talking about the military, and he said about a fellow, I have to be a man, he was a 3-star general and he never got his 4-star. I said, really? I said, in a word, what's the difference between a 3-star and a 4-star general? And he said, the board chair said, judgment. We have a chair who has great judgment. There we are.
That I think that expands and extends to our leadership team as well. I think we all exercise, everyone at MBN that I've worked with so far exercises really sound judgment. And I think that helps a lot.
I think that's true. I'm going to say sound judgment, and sound judgment that benefits from due diligence. So it's not a war of opinions in our senior leadership team. People have opinions. I'm very opinionated, but people always understand, here's what I think, or here's what I'm inclined toward. No, let's do the homework. Let's really study it, check our blind spots, do the due diligence, and come up with, we're in this world today. We live today in a world of instant opinion. We're after considered opinion. How about that? If you could think of something that MBN does exceptionally well compared to some other companies, and maybe something we do less well, where we could learn from other experience. So take a shot at any of that.
I mean, that sounds like a job interview. You're not supposed to say the negatives in a podcast.
I asked. We want to learn.
Let's see. I'll answer the second question first. So what MBN does well, I think I've seen, you're really intentional about culture. And I think that's important, especially considering the drastic transitions that have happened over the course of the year. Being able to, because that impacts morale. When we downsized, we didn't have many people leave after that of their own volition. They stayed. And that speaks volumes to the culture and the morale. And how that shows up to me is you have board members that actively come and join the weekly potluck lunches that come to the town halls in person and answer questions and engage with the staff. At board meetings, we talk about all staff members at every level, not just the leadership team. And so the board not only understands MBN's operations at its core, but also the staff feel like they are respected, they are getting access to the senior leadership and the board. And it seems it's a very sort of cohesive, collaborative environment. And I think—
So Raji, that's a really long, flattering, positive answer. Now you have to say something where—
Negative.
If you're looking at other companies, something, not negative, something where from your experience, we could up our game. That's the question.
Well, I'll be a little technical in this answer, but we are going to hopefully change that this year or make strides. Is On the back end, there's a lot of still manual processes and manual sort of like approval workflows. It takes time and it's redundant and it's not efficient. And so I am, I actively recognize that, and I want to work with our deputy CFO. We're currently evaluating a tool that will help on the back end for like one or two processes, but I think that can go further. And I know we were in the middle of automating some items before we lost our funding, or there was that pause in funding. And in a way, it's good that that happened, because the path we were charting down was very expensive and probably not the right fit for the organization of the size that we are today. So it gave us that flexibility to put a pin in it and now move forward and try to automate and streamline our internal operating procedures and processes. Mm-hmm. So I think that's one thing that we can improve.
That's helpful. And then an impactful moment. It doesn't have to be grand. It could be anything during your tenure with us thus far. Experience, encounter with somebody at the company.
Honestly, for me, I have fond memories of my very first day at MBN. I think Deidre had organized, she's our COO, had organized a full team meeting in your office to introduce me. And it was everyone on finance and I think some tech folks and some ops folks. There's a lot of people. I don't think I remembered everyone's name in that meeting. But we had such a great conversation. And it was my road building and bridge building that I took an opportunity to do that during that meeting. And I think it really had an impact, because the team started coming to me individually and telling me things almost immediately, because I had gained their respect, because I was giving them context and I was being an open book to them and saying, look, this is how I operate. This is what I am here to do, sort of providing context, laying my framework and guide on how I work. And I really think that helped, build the relationships that we have that I have today.
So I know we returned to Chris toward the end of this podcast. And again, I apologize for what sounds like propaganda or disinformation. But as Chris said, Raji is amazing. But Raji, you are persuasive. And that takes style and temperament, but also substance. And you won people's trust early. So thank you for that.
This has just been so interesting, and I appreciate both of you. And it's interesting when I don't know a thing about either of you in this context. And so I'm just listening and learning. So much of what the rest of us read in headlines, you're dealing with in the moment. And so much of Jeff, you mentioned sort of the machete that was taken rather than the scalpel, and you all are on the business end of that. Well, okay, so what do we do? I have several questions. Raji, you mentioned systems and processes, and I'm glad you did. When you got in there, what other just mechanical things did you recognize that, if forecasting improved, this could be, or our reporting is not where it could be, let me explain why, and let me show us a different way? Or what other mechanical, just kind of nuts and bolts did you feel like needed to be tightened for things to start to make a different kind of sense?
So budgeting was one thing we touched upon, right? I think in the past, because the budget wasn't changing year over year much. We were getting more or less a fixed amount from the government annually. And so most people or the folks who were stepping into those positions were getting fed budgets as opposed to building their own budgets or doing a bottoms up budget, which is what we're doing now, because things have shifted and changed, and we're reporting in different ways, and we're doing podcasts and newsletters and different forms of media. And so that needs a fresh set of eyes. And that leads to more accountability and ownership, which will also have ripple effects to then when the leader of the department or the editorial wants to make a shift or change, they will have the tools to do so. They will know how to do so. Whereas before, I don't think that was necessarily, it was always, can I do this? I need to make this change. How do I do that? Can I do this? Now it's more, hey, I want to do this, this, and this, and I feel like I have this flexibility here. I don't necessarily need, I can trim here X, Y, and Z. So, and throughout this process, we've, since this is new for some, we are sitting down, coaching, guiding, and building that muscle so that they feel comfortable doing this in the future. I think one of the other things that we're fixing or went away, but there was the payments, the approvals for the payments they're done over email, right? And so if someone's out or they step away, they don't see it right away and it's not approved, then the payment doesn't go through, then someone's wondering why their payment's delayed, that can be automated. And so that's what we're looking to, and it was on the pathway to do that. But again, the tools that we had chosen just don't fit the company we are now today. So we're taking a fresh look at that and hope to have something in the next few weeks, which is great.
Jeff, how have those mechanical things, much of our discussion, and I'm going to return to it, was around the cultural fit, the stylistic imperatives. How have some of those more mechanical things changed the way that you approach the problem solving involved with some of these things?
So Chris, we're talking, and understandably, with Raji, who is the CFO, but of course, this is a company with HR and legal and operations and editorial. We're a media company. I mean, that's the essence. We're a media company supported by all these other functions. And so we have a fantastic editor-in-chief. We have a fantastic editorial chair. And then in parallel to what Raji and her deputy have been doing, we are strengthening processes. We're strengthening accountability. All these little mundane things that are so important. Updating job descriptions. Everybody has to know who their boss is. Everybody has to know what the feedback loop is. Everybody has to know, apart from an annual review, when they're doing a good job, and everybody has to know how we're measuring progress and what outcomes or products or newsletters or podcasts or television shows are required of them. So I'm broad brushing this, but across the company, greater oversight, greater accountability, a greater outcomes-driven culture. Having said that, let me add as a footnote, I think some people interpret these things as sticks, and people are not machines. And we're trying, back to the culture issue, to build trust, treat people decently, honorably, respectfully, and with kindness. Imagine you work for a company that has lost 90% of the workforce over the last 14, 16, 18 months. It's bruising. It's unsettling. It's deflating. One of the things Raji said, which is so important, is our retention is really pretty good. Our recruitment is pretty good. It shows that people, I don't know if they find it, Raji, fun working for MBN, but I do think they find it meaningful, purposeful, gratifying, and I think that's pretty good.
Raji, is there a data point? I am fascinated with the story of we faced bankruptcy and we were looking at right in the face, and a different decision could have been made and the road would be clearly split, but you made some really big decisions. Is there a data point that you look at and you say, that one is really, sometimes in these conversations we can say, oh, profit improved by 3% in the last 3 quarters, and that's fascinating. And, supply chain improvements meant this. That's not what we're doing here. For me, I wonder if that data point, like the other side of that, we were able to do this because we made this decision, or is there some other data point for you that is like, this one really sticks out? This number means something to me as we've been working through these things.
I wouldn't say there's a number because the numbers shifted as Jeff mentioned, we had multiple scenarios that we were planning and plotting through. I will say that there was a moment when we were making that decision, and it was with the board and the leadership team. We all felt strongly that MBN serves a very genuinely real purpose and has a mission to uphold, and it was more important to save MBN if we could than to just close shop, right? Because those were at one point, those were our two options because we didn't have enough money in the bank to do much else. And so it was really tough, but we thought, well, we can fight. It's worth fighting for. MBN and MBN's mission and our purpose is worth fighting for.
So Chris, I agree. Of course, I agree with Raji fully. And then I don't want the audience of this podcast to think, wow, well done, you made it. We've not made it.
No.
Can I say that? So people say to me, what does success, ultimate success and winning look like? It's stay alive, stay viable, and show value and vibrancy. But there is no point in this political atmosphere where you land and go, okay, we're done. Okay. And of course, that applies to the wider media market too, undergoing such sea change in technology with fierce competition, et cetera, et cetera. So what we're telling you, I think it's a great story, but the story is far from over and lots of the fight lies still ahead.
Yeah, we're in it. We didn't go through it. We're in it.
Yeah. There was a question I think I didn't ask because it was about how, we've truly turned a corner and there was a turnaround period. I'm like, no, we're still in it, right?
We don't even know what could be behind this corner. We're just creeping over it sort of.
Right. Maybe it's multiple corners, right? We don't know. It's a maze. You don't really know what the next corner holds.
Exactly.
We turn one corner to face another.
Well said.
And as I kind of move us into a close here, there is an alternate reality where a ruthless, cold pragmatism is at work to make some of these decisions or to follow what seems to sometimes be a ruthless, cold pragmatism on, above your station that is impacting you. But that's not the attitude that either of you bring to leadership, as you've made clear. But we talked about kind of the need for nimbleness and agility, and there's a gracefulness that's required here to be able to show up at work and be a strong person and a strong leader so that others can understand sort of the cultural approach that's going to be taken here. Raji, I'm going to put you on the spot. What are some of it's very easy and fun when we can say, I can crunch numbers like this because my skill sets are here. I'm really great at seeing this big picture in this way. That's awesome. But there's something else underneath. For you, what do you think are some characteristics that you bring that contribute to this nimbleness, this way of being agile, this way of being calm under pressure? How do you see yourself in that light? It's
funny you say calm under pressure because it's fun. I can't tell you how many people who've come to me, whether on my team or peers, that say, you're so calming to talk to as a CFO, especially when things are like, things don't go your way or there's some issue with the budget or the numbers. I don't get worked up because I know that there's a solution, right? And I think for me, I pride myself in thinking outside the box and being really creative and being able to and taking calculated risks. And I enjoy change because I don't fear it because change most times can be positive, right? If done well and led well. And one of the examples at another point, I think it was in September, Jeff, when I came down and we had a leadership retreat. And we were all around the table and look, all of us are experiencing the same, externalities and the same reality and challenges as our staff. But we can't go into work every day, cringing or being, oh my God, it's, coming in with a pessimistic attitude, or we have to lead by example and we have to show that we are viable, to Jeff's point, and we are vibrant. And how do we do that? We show up that way for our staff because look, we can live to fight another day. And that's exciting. And that gives us motivation and that gives us hope. And if you come in every day with that attitude, it's infectious and you get, the staff to buy in to what you're selling.
Jeff, my question for you is, in that context, it seems to me that the two of you are cut from some of the same cloth, which is part of why you have this interesting, healthy dynamic. But what of what Raji has kind of described and of what you know complements your skill sets? Where do you have a weakness? And I'm asking that because you've been so candid. Where do you have a weakness that she comes in to help support or compensate in some way for, so that your leadership is stronger because of it?
Well, I appreciate that. I think that I learned from Raji in terms of style and temperament and calm. I can be a little bit high and tightly wired at times, as we all can, but I do. I think that Raji and I both have a sense for the politics of the moment and that sole funding source we have. I'm not a finance guy, and Raji isn't an editorial gal, if I may put it that way. And I think we have this common bond that we share and that we get from the other staff members and senior leadership team. It's, we come to work, hard at work on all the nuts and bolts, but with a sense of service. Service to the mission, but service to one another. And lo and behold, you can make very, very hard decisions that you suffer through, and that employees struggle if they're on the receiving end of being de-staffed, let go. But let me put it this way. We all know this. Life is short, and at the end of it all, no one wants inscribed on their tombstone number of units sold.
Yeah.
Right? What really, really matters, if you take a deep, deep breath, and transaction and productivity and our journalistic quality and integrity and audience size and platforms, but are we serving the mission and serving each other with decency and honor and empathy as best we can? That's something. I get that from Raji. I think we complement each other in that way.
Jeff, I could not in any way find a better way to conclude this conversation than with what you just said. So I'm gonna with gratitude thank both of you so much for being a part of this, for your candor, for your enthusiasm, for your compassionate leadership in a time when we may need more of that. There's something special at MBN going on clearly, and I hope that we can come back a year from now, 3 years from now, and continue the conversation on what's been changing and what's been new, what lessons have been learned. I would be fascinated with that. Raji Kalra is at ProCFOPartners.com. Jeff Gedmin is the president and CEO at MBN. You're both amazing individuals and leaders and people, and I'm really grateful for the conversation today. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Raji.
Thanks for watching, and a special thanks to our subscribers. Consider becoming one today. Visit ProCFOPartners.com for more strategies and ideas for financial management and growth to help you put your business's financial picture in context.